Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swagglehos. And in this video, we need to talk about how the WGA strike is now officially over. Yes, very, very exciting news. Seems like the writers and producers have figured it out and they're going to be going back to work soon. Perhaps SAG-AFTRA will soon follow. And being that Loki Season 2 is coming out next week, we have to ask ourselves the question, are things now going to start to turn around in the comic book market? Probably not. I mean, I think we still have a lot of macroeconomic things to deal with, but that doesn't mean that we can't take a trip down memory lane in today's video and talk about some of the books that are of interest to Loki Season 2. These were books, of course, that went crazy during Loki Season 1, and I thought it would be kind of good to sort of look back on some of these books and maybe get ahead of what we might be seeing next week in the market. Because while I don't think that we're going to be seeing record prices for anything anytime soon, I do think that we will see a little bit of traction. If Ashoka is any indication of how the comic market is reacting to the current Disney shows, I do think that there will be increased liquidity in some of the books out there related to the property, and that might be true of Loki as well. But of course, before I get into it, if you guys could like, comment, subscribe, I would appreciate it. Help support the channel, doing those things. But let's get into this video here today. Of course, Loki Season 2 coming out next week. Can you guys believe it? We are a week away from this show. And I would say similarly to that of Secret Invasion almost, it doesn't feel like there is a tremendous amount of hype. And I did pull up a few books that I thought would be sort of interesting to talk about, maybe give us a reason to, talk about the macro market and give some predictions of where things might be going. And the first book I actually wanted to discuss is, of course, for the titular character. This one, of course, is Journey into Mystery number 85, First Appearance of Loki. And this is a book that I feel like is still very interesting. I mean, I really do like this book. Early Silver Age, 1962. I mean, anytime you can get a book in 1962 as a Silver Age Marvel, I feel like that's always very good as far as protecting your downside risk. Not too many on the census, only 1,446 universal copies. That is less than a lot of Silver Age books. But this is something that I wanted to focus on here, kind of in the mid to low grade. We actually do see that there has been a lot of 30-day moving averages for these books. Now, I mentioned Ashoka earlier, and it is interesting to think about how the books have been moving out there in the market. We haven't talked too much about it, but even though we're not seeing record prices for any of those books, it does feel like, people are enjoying the show, and we have seen movement out there. I mean, I think people are willing to just sort of unload their heir to the empires and give people good deals. And there's actually, demand side as well, because people are watching the show. They're thinking, hey, Thrawn's pretty cool. Might as well pick up this book. And I think that we're starting to maybe feel some of that for Journey into Mystery 85 as well. Now, this is of a price point that makes it a little bit more difficult to move. I mean, we're talking about, a four-figure book. And this is definitely a book that, doesn't sell too often at a fixed price. I mean, we are going to see auctions for this book. Like in this calendar year alone, you can see that this book at the 3.0 range has sold 7 times. And of those 7 times, 4 of them have been auctions and only 3 of them have been fixed price. 2 fixed price purchases here in this last month of September, which actually suggests to me that, hey, yeah, people are actually thinking, hey, the trailer for Loki Season 2 looked good. The prices are down. Maybe I should make a purchase on this book because, prior to that, in these 8 other months that we've had in this calendar year, we've only had 1 fixed price. And that's not to say that there weren't books sitting there on eBay, like ready to be bought. So I do think that we're kind of meeting a place where supply and demand are kind of leveling out. And this is a book that, remember when we got the first season of Loki, that was right at peak comic book boom. I mean, the 3.0s were selling for, look at that, $3,400 at the peak for a 3.0, whereas now, last couple of sales are $1,600, $1,700. And we've had a lot of froth come off the top of it. And a lot of people are thinking, hey, this is a good time to buy once again. Now, do we think that things could go lower? Do we think that the macroeconomic policies can push this book further down? Yeah, it's certainly possible, but it is still selling above that 2020 price, which to me, is still the key factor with all of these Silver Age blue chips. And I think generally across the board, you see that with this particular book. And I do think that this is still a book that, is still a good buy overall. I mean, it's always going to be a big key that people really appreciate. If I go here to the GPA analysis and I just pull up the 4.0, this is actually a book that, generally speaking, has moved in tandem to the MCU over the years. Now, you might be thinking that the MCU is dead and that these movies don't matter anymore. That certainly could be the case if that's how you feel, but it does feel like Tom Hiddleston Loki is going to be a key figure, at least through Secret Wars. So that at least there's going to be some attention attention on this book, for the next 4 years or so. And as you guys can see, yes, it was flat early in the 2000s, kind of around the $100 range. But, over the years, every 2 years or so, it would go up a couple $100, a couple $100, 3 to 2, 4 to 5 here, 7 to 5s, 6s, 7s, 9s, 1000s, 9s, and then shot up here in 2021, and now has kind of reset back down to the $1,900 price point, which maybe is still a little bit hot, depending on the model that you use to evaluate these things, but still a good buy. And it's my speculation that, we might actually start to see a couple purchases at good deals for this book, especially when we get the show next week. All right, the next book I thought would be interesting to talk about is Fantastic Four number 353. Oh, do you remember this book, ladies and gentlemen? Of course, the first appearance of Mobius M. Mobius, who is Owen Wilson's character in the show. Now, an important thing to point out with this book is that if you are somebody who wants to get it, make sure you buy the direct edition. The direct edition actually has Mobius right here in the corner. This is of a year where newsstands actually matter more. So this is the one example of a book where the newsstand is probably not the one that you want to get. But a very fun book, not necessarily one that I think is going to have any sort of mega returns in the future, but it does feel like Owen Wilson is a character that, people enjoy. He has a charming personality. It seems like he's going to be used in the Deadpool film as well. And who's to say that he won't, have a role in at least the rest of the multiverse sort of saga. So kind of an interesting one to keep our eye on. This, of course, is a book that got absolutely way too out of control, selling at the $600 range when the initial show came out. I mean, the problem with this book is that, prior to that, it had never really been a key. I mean, maybe there are people out there that enjoyed having this book, in a 9.8 range, but, this going from $90 to $600 was just way too much, way too quickly. Then it had a massive crash. Everybody, raced to the bottom and actually settled around the $80 range earlier in the year. But we actually have, once again, seen sort of that fixed price uptick where, we see someone buying it at $169. We see an auction at $67 falling through the cracks, but we see another fixed price here at $154. We see another fixed price here at $149. So in the last couple of months since the trailers have been out, there actually has been some interest in this book. And I can imagine that, over the course of this show, people might actually start to pick it up. We might actually have people that say, you know what, I actually just want to have this book because I think it's, a cool one to have in the collection. I mean, it could go to zero. I mean, there's always risk with some of these books that are like the Copper Age ones, especially now when, we've been talking about on the channel how there's so many comic book collections that are coming up for sale. And there's a lot of copies of these types of books. A lot of people have the FF 353 in their, Copper Age collection, just sitting in their attic. So, one of the risks with these books is that, they're right now in this market, as people are bringing their collections, to LCSs and bringing their collections to dealers, there's a lot of people that have this book and they're ready to sort of unload it, and they can make a blowout sale for it, because if they're picking up these collections for, 30 cents on the dollar, then they can happily sell these, minor keys for $5 or $10 back into the market. So there's a lot of deals to be had with a book like this. So it's very, very hard to get that, $25 FOMO sale like you did get back in 2021, or $50, at a time I think that this book was selling for. Now, do I think that in the future, when there's, quantitative easing and there's like, free money in the market, will you be able to capitalize on some of these books? Yeah, I actually do think so. I think that 2025 will be the year of the spec book once again. All right, let's talk about the next book here. I think is going to have a little bit of attention come next week in Loki season 2. And of course, we're talking about Avengers number 23. This is the first appearance of Ravonna Renslayer. Now, Ravonna Renslayer, as some of you guys know, is the love interest of Kang, and it does feel like they're probably working their way towards that. Of course, we got Judge Renslayer in the TVA Council. It feels like maybe she was working for Loki. I'm sure they're going to explore her storyline a little bit more in season 2. And this book, outside of her first appearance, is also the first Silver Age Marvel work of John Romita. So I do think for that factor alone, this book is pretty cool. I mean, a great cover. This picture doesn't really do it justice. This is always a cool one to have in the collection. Now, this is also what I like to call sort of that slingshot book, where a lot of people will happily sell it, if it ever goes up to that $100 price point. Right now, you can see that this book, on eBay in the raw form just flies under the radar. I mean, $13, $14. Someone got a buy now for $100. It depends on the grade. A 2.5 selling for $26, basically just the price of the slab right there. So this is one I suspect that maybe we'll get a few raw purchases come next week for this one if Ravonna has like, any sort of meaningful role in the show, but also one that, I don't think it's ever really going to reach the heights that it did back in season 1, where this was easily, a 3-figure book basically at every single grade. All right, let's talk about this book right here. I think that this one might be one that we could see show up on trending lists and things like that. This right here is She-Hulk number 3. And what is the significance of this? Well, this is actually the first appearance of 2 TVA characters. I'm going to butcher their name. I believe one of them is Oribus. Basically the character of the actor Ki Kwan, who, if you guys may know him as Short Round, or if you saw the Everything Everywhere All at Once, he sort of made his glorious return in it. It feels like his character is going to be pretty charming, and maybe there's going to be interest out there for people who want to pick up this book. I mean, a lot of She-Hulk collectors, especially modern She-Hulk collectors, when there's covers like this, and kind of an interesting spec book. Again, not one that I think is something that you should chase, or not one that I think is, going to be a book that is going to go to the moon. But this is one where it's like at that price point where, yeah, when that character shows up and people make the association to this book, probably there's going to be some purchases on it. Probably there's going to be movement on it, but it'll most likely be, a $5 book later on in the year. Again, I do think there will be a time in the future when spec books do go crazy, but we're going to have to be in like 2025 or 2026 for that to actually happen. Speaking of spec books going crazy, we got to talk about Avengers Annual number 21 from 1991. And what is the significance of this? Well, this is the first full appearance of the Anachronauts, who are basically Kang the Conqueror's evil henchmen, but it is also the first appearance of Victor Timely, one of the Kang variants who we know for a fact is going to be showing up. I do think that this is going to be one that has a little bit of attention next week. Perhaps, if you're somebody out there who has it in your back stock, maybe it'll be worth kind of listing it for whatever you get, $5, $10. Might actually make a sale on this one. But still a cool book regardless. I mean, Mark Gruenwald, one of my favorite writers of this time. This does establish a lot of Kang lore. So it'll be interesting to see if they do explore it in the show. All right, last book to talk about is a personal favorite of mine right here. Of course, we have to talk about Avengers number 8, first appearance of Kang the Conqueror. Now, I don't actually think that we're going to be seeing Kang the Conqueror, but it felt appropriate to talk about it regardless. Now, we still don't really know what's going to happen with the Jonathan Majors, but I think it's pretty safe to assume that Marvel is not going to abandon the Kang storyline. I mean, if they have to recast the character, they'll just do that instead. So this book is still going to have some relevance. Now, again, we've talked about it on the channel before, where this book has definitely gotten a lot more interest recently due to the hype surrounding the Kang character. Maybe back in the day, it was a little bit of a key that kind of had a slight return where, in 2016, 2015, it was maybe a $100 book at the 4.0 range. And then in 2018, kind of shot up when people were sort of speculating about Kang. And then when we got the casting announcement, it shot up once again to the $500 price point. And to where it sits right now is actually a little bit lower than when it got the initial bump back in October of 2020. October of 2020 was when they announced that Jonathan Majors was going to be playing Kang. So this is one of the books that in some levels has actually fallen below its 2020 price point. And that is due to the fact that it got an early inflation with the casting announcement. I mean, maybe this actually has to go all the way down to like the $300 price point here at the 4.0 range in order for it to officially reset. I mean, that is certainly possible that it could go that low. I mean, it's not that far away. I mean, some of these auctions right here, here at Comic Connect finished at $385 for the 4.0 price point. So, not too far away from sort of the natural price that it would have sold for back in early 2020 before the book was actually one that got inflated. So, I think as long as, macro policies are still tight, I think as long as interest rates are still high, there could be those auctions that fall back, but at least it feels like the biggest corrections have already happened for this book. And you can actually see right here, this eBay auction actually finished just a couple weeks ago at $511. So a big difference from what we saw a month ago at $385. And I think that has to do with maybe the fact that people are excited about Loki season 2. Now at the 7.0 level, where it's a little bit harder to get this here in the mid-ish, high-ish grade, this is actually a book that is still holding above its 2020 value. I mean, it did still feel the inflation of the casting announcement. So back in September of 2020, it was at $11.25. Last auction for this was at, $10.25, so a little bit lower than that. But it does feel like, this book has, for at least a time, sort of found that floor at the $1,000 price point. So still a 4-figure book at the 7.0 range. Could it go lower? Yeah, absolutely. I think that there might be some auctions that could finish at that $900 level, if nobody is really watching, but you'll still get those fixed price purchases, at that $1,300 range. Now, the question is, will we see this book actually move, in tandem to the show next week? Probably not so much. I mean, there's going to be a few sales out there, but again, we're not expecting any sort of record prices. The only record prices that we may actually see are going to be from books like She-Hulk #3, where, effectively it's highest 9.8. I mean, I don't know what the highest 9.8 for that book was, but let's say it was $50. Yeah, maybe it'll sell for $100, when we see Short Round show up in an episode and do something cool or funny. So that is me taking a walk down memory lane. I mean, here we are again, a week away from season 2 of Loki. What do you guys expect with this show? Do you guys feel like the MCU is dead? Do you guys think that this show is going to be any good? Are you excited for this show? It doesn't feel like too many people are excited, but it also does feel like a lot of people are excited. I still think that there's some good books like Jim 85 that is always going to be a great book to have in anyone's collection. Will we see record prices? Probably not, but I do think that in the future, those books will definitely bounce back. Anyways, that's all I got for this video. Like, comment, subscribe. See you all in the next one.